Hey, welcome. My name is Stephanie Schott, and I work for Best Beginnings as the Early Literacy Director. I wanted to talk to you now about some of the benefits of reading aloud to children and really why it's so important that we start reading to them at a young age. If you're not familiar with Best Beginnings, it is our mission to make sure that all Alaska children begin school ready to succeed, but we really want them to be also ready to succeed in life. So we want to make sure that they have kindergarten readiness at hand by the time they get there. And the part of the way that we do that is through parent education to make sure that parents understand that they are such a valuable first teacher to their child. You have such a big role in your child's life. So a lot of the learning that starts at home. This is the only slide that has some jargon on it, and I apologize, but I really wanted to give you a strong basis in the idea behind what early literacy looks like. And the idea behind early literacy is that we're giving children all of the building blocks they need so that when they are ready to read, they have the tools at hand. So the elements down here are just some of the things, most of the things that are really, really important to children as they learn to love language and part of their early literacy learning. The concept of print is the idea, especially in English, that we read left to right and we read top to bottom. It's the idea that print is a language all on its own. Even if children don't understand it, they understand that these are symbols and that they represent our language. The phonological awareness is the idea that words have smaller sounds, that there are syllables, that there are rhymes. And if you think about it, we have a lot of really nonsense nursery rhymes that we use with young children. And the idea behind those even is just introducing language, the sound of language to children. Letter knowledge is pretty easy one to understand. It's the idea that a symbol like that looks like the letter A is the letter A. It's the idea that they can put that together and that later, not only do they recognize the symbol of the letter, but they recognize that A has its own sound and it's different from the letter B, and it also looks different from the letter B. Vocabulary, again, pretty self-explanatory. What we're trying to do when we read to children or even talk with them is we're trying to expand their world. We're giving them the words they need to express themselves. And so we want to make sure that they have all the vocabulary they can possibly have, especially by the time they get to kindergarten, so that when they start to learn to read, I've already encountered a lot of the words that they're going to try to learn to read. Oral language is the idea that our human speech has patterns to it. And so really children need to listen to language to understand how it all works. That is a really vital part because as a language learner, the very first thing that you learn is to listen to a language. That's how you start to understand it and to make the distinction between words. You understand the patterns, you hear the patterns, and you start to make what sounds like a jumble of words into smaller pieces. And then what you're hopefully getting to then is what is that sound and what is that connection to that sound? So this may surprise you as one of the very, very important things that happens when you read to your child. Bonding isn't always necessarily the first thing on people's list, but I do personally feel like children not only learn to read on the laps of their parents, which is a very familiar saying, but that coziness, that snuggling that you get with a child when you read together with them, that bond is so important to a parent and a child. But what it does is it cements reading as a favorite thing to do together, a really wonderful, comfortable, safe space where you're together. And what's wonderful about reading together is that even though you are still in the parent role, you kind of don't have to do anything except read the script, right? If you really want to. That's the easiest thing to do. You can just read it and you can be with your child, answer questions, talk about the illustrations. But it's just such a wonderful way for a family to relax together, to bond, and spend really great quality time together. And there are even studies that say that parents who read aloud consistently to their children are generally less harsh in their parenting because there is that bond with their child. This is, of course, the big one. Language development is really what we're trying to get to children by reading to them. We want to make sure that they have vocabulary. And one of the really wonderful things about reading together out loud is that there's vocabulary in books that we know, adults know thousands of words, but we don't use them every day. And we don't especially use them with younger children. We usually have a very specialized, simplified language that we use with our children. But what's wonderful about books is that they have a lot of unique vocabulary. And so that gives a chance for a child to really kind of soak up a whole lot more words that you might not use with them in a regular day. So, for example, you might be reading a book together about a frog, and the frog can leap, it can hop, it can jump. So, those alone are 3 words that mean the same thing. So, you're really just giving your child a larger set of words to express themselves and to express ideas and things that they see in the world around them. And of course, when you're reading aloud to them, they're listening. And that's really, really important. One of the best things that you can do, obviously, is reading to your child, but listening is, again, part of learning the language, of understanding the rhymes and the rhythms of it and the patterns and how it all works together. So it's a fantastic way to make sure that children get the most solid foundation they can with language. Imagination, not surprisingly, is another wonderful thing about reading books together. You are fueling a child's world that they create. You're giving them the characters, you're giving them the situations, you're giving them things that they can play with. I mean that literally and figuratively. So they can play with the stories that they're reading about. They can play and pretend to be the characters they're reading about. And that is a really fantastic starting point for a child to then bring other parts to their story and to create new worlds. Play is one of the best places that children can really experiment with language and show their comprehension of what they're actually hearing. And it's another wonderful, wonderful place to really understand problem solving. When you read a book, there's a character, usually they have a problem, and then usually by the end of the book, it's solved. So it's a really great way for children to understand that if you have a problem, hopefully you can solve it. Maybe it means talking to a parent or talking to a friend. And hopefully there is a modeling of how to problem solve. It can also be a book that has a scientific theme to it. So it could just be like, how do I get this box from here to there? Well, maybe I need to create a fulcrum. Maybe I need to, I need to think about how I can do this. So it's really exciting when children see a character that is experiencing something that they have experienced in their own life or will experience in their own life, and then how they solve it. So it's a really good, again, a really great foundation for understanding that children may have problems that could be solved and can be solved, and how they can possibly solve them. And not only that, but it teaches them that they are a person with feelings and emotions, which is very important, but it also teaches them that they're part of a wider world. So the social emotional development of a child is the understanding that not only do they have a self which can be hurt, which can experience joy or pain, but understanding that is something that other people also experience is a very large leap in a child's world. Understanding that other people have feelings just like them, regardless of what they look like, is a really, really important thing that we can teach to our children. So the idea is when you read books, they can be a mirror, they can be a window, or they could be a sliding door. A book that is a mirror shows a child a world that looks like their own. It is either an experience that is something that is similar to something that they're going through, or actually looks like them. And that's why representation is so important. We want to make sure that all children have a character that they can look at and see and understand that is like them. That is another person exactly like them, which is really important for development of identity. Windows are books that give us a chance to look into the world of someone else and to understand what their cultural details look like, what their life looks like, what their home looks like, what languages they speak, what holidays they celebrate. So it gives you a view into the world that is not your own, which is very important, again, for children in terms of their social emotional development. And sliding doors are books that have a story that children can walk into and be a part of. So an author and or an illustrator have created a world, real or imagined, that a child can walk into and be a part of. And that's really exciting, again, because you need to learn how to put yourselves in the shoes of other people, but you also need to understand what it's like to go into a situation where it's all new to you. And sometimes it's imaginative, but sometimes it's historical. So there's lots of different ways that people can use books to have a sliding door into another world. Very, very important. Attention span is one of the things that I think every kindergarten teacher will tell you they want a kindergartner to have by the time they start school. Attention span is something that grows with a child. So very, very young children, pretty much, maybe 5, 10 minutes with a book is about all they can handle. But as a child grows, their attention span grows with them. So it's really exciting that you might just start reading a book with a child and they might have no attention span for you. They might not, it might not be the day to really go reading with them or to try to do that. And so what's really great to see is as they get older, they may get out of that phase. They might have a phase where they're ripping books or they're putting them in their mouth and that's all they want to do with them. But there might be a phase where they're like bringing you books and they want that to happen. So the attention span that they grow as you read together at the home is so important for their school readiness, so that they have the ability to pay attention and to focus, which is really, really important as a learner. And then hopefully, if you've done all of these things, you have a lifelong reader right in front of you that you've created. Um, we want children to enjoy books, to love reading. And so you need to follow their interests as you can as they grow. And when you do that, you create lifelong readers who then really are lifelong learners. There's a saying that first you learn to read and then you read to learn. And that's really what you're giving to a child. It's a huge gift. A child who is literate has a whole world open to them and can experience the world in a way that makes sense to them, but also they can answer those questions they have as they come up. So it's really a huge gift, that literacy. So it sounds so simple. It's really very complicated, and we front load as much of it as we can as parents. All that early childhood education that we have at home or in daycare or childcare or early education centers, all of that is building to creating a reader who is then a learner. And then really just making sure that you're reading together is the most important part. I've kind of talked about why it's so important, but what does it look like to read together? Well, when a child is really young, their attention span is really short, so you use really simple books. I'm not going to give you a list here because there are hundreds and thousands of books that relate to ages and stages that are appropriate for your child. And you can look through those and kind of decide what's the best for your child. But really reading together, it doesn't necessarily have to be, 15 minutes a day is a great goal, but it doesn't work for every family. Sometimes you're trying to read and the dishwasher breaks and you have to deal with that. Sometimes your child is having a major meltdown and it's not going to work. It's perfectly okay also as for especially when younger children have a divided attention, to let them play and to read to them or tell them a story at the same time. They can listen to the story, but they can also play and be active. And sometimes that works for especially active children. That might be sometimes an easier way to make sure that they're getting books as part of their daily diet. But just try to make it consistent if you can. It's also really exciting for children to hear stories, not just from their parents, but from other adults or from older siblings. That can make reading kind of more interesting for them as well. And just remember that if your child has a favorite character, go with that. If your child is really, really interested in dogs, just go with all the books about dogs. If your child is really interested in one particular character, go with it. And part of why that's so important is because they're identifying themselves. They're learning about themselves and about what they enjoy, which is really part of the excitement of reading. So you want to follow their interest and remember that you will read and reread and reread and reread their favorite book to them over and over and over again. And it might make you a little frustrated at times that your child doesn't want to learn or read another book. But it's really, really important. Repetition is the starting point of learning. So a child's love of something is really exciting. There are lots of children who are experts on dinosaurs because it is something that they are fascinated by and they learn everything about it and they have a very unique vocabulary. And it's so exciting because they have become an expert on something. And that is mastery of knowledge, which is so exciting. And that's really what we want to see. We want children to feel engaged by books. We want them to feel like their books are an ally for them in their journey of learning. So make sure that you do it and don't feel guilty. Don't feel guilty at all if it doesn't work some nights or if it's just harder sometimes to do it. It happens in all families, and children go through so many phases, but just stick with it. If a book doesn't work right now, try it later. Maybe it'll be better when they're older. Or maybe again, they're just really distracted or having a hard time and it's not the right time. Maybe you're having a hard time. That's okay. Don't feel guilty because it'll happen. You will keep reading with your child, but don't feel bad about those times when it doesn't work out. If you have any questions or need any resources, do not hesitate to reach out. As I said, my name is Stephanie Schott. I'm the Early Literacy Director at Best Beginnings. We have a website which has lots of resources for families and for educators. We have some early learning activities that you can do with your child at home. We also have book lists, and if you want, you can sign up for our parent newsletter. Each month has a theme, and then each week within the month, we send you an email either about tips about the theme. We send you book lists, we send you activity ideas and things that you can do at home. So if you're looking to stay engaged with your child, I recommend checking out our website. Thank you so much for taking some time to do all of this with me, to listen to me talk to you about why it's so important to read with your child. And I hope that really it's something that becomes a part of your family's life and that you treasure those memories. Thanks so much.